Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Kind of Funny. We're going to do another very exciting kind of one-off interview. You guys might remember a couple months ago, right before Bloodstained was revealed, Koji Igarashi's game, we had him over, one of my favorite Japanese developers, for an hour-and-a-half conversation about Castlevania and Konami and just the future of game development and Japanese game development. Well, I'm super, super excited to do this again with another one of my favorite Japanese game developers, creating one of the great Japanese series of all time. This is Kazutaka Kodaka, who's a writer and kind of visionary, the concept originator of Danganronpa, which is one of my favorite series of the last few years. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thank you. こちらこそ.
Thank you very much.
So I kind of just want to take this free flowing because I feel like we can learn a lot from you just by speaking with no agenda.
Sounds good.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself first? And you know, obviously you work for Spike Chunsoft, but what is your experience with games? What is your experience kind of working in the industry and all of this?
もともとは映画を志してて、映画のシナリオをやってました。
So originally I dreamed of working in film, and I wanted to deal with that. That was my dream.
まあでも日本映画ってもう本当今の日本のゲームよりちょっとやばいんで、そこでオリジナルを作るっていうことができなくて、僕はオリジナルが作りたくて映画を志してなんですけど、それができないってことで、まあゲームの方に流れるようになりました。
So actually, the Japanese film industry is an even worse place than the Japanese game industry. And my goal, my dream, was to work and create something original. And I could see very early on that I wasn't going to be able to do that in the Japanese film industry. Therefore, I switched over to games.
でまあ会社に入るときに、まあコナミとかカプコンとかソニーとかいろんな大きな会社があるんですけど、まあそこに入っちゃうと逆に自分のオリジナルを作るためにはこうライバルが多すぎてなかなか企画も通んないかなと思ったんで。まあ中小というかしょぼいスパイクっていうのを選びました。
So, you know, originally, obviously, there was a idea that maybe I could go to Sony or Capcom or Konami. But the truth of the matter is, in a company that big, I wouldn't be able to do what I wanted to do. I wouldn't have the opportunities. So I decided that, you know what, let's go for something a little bit, you know, smaller, maybe mid-tier. Well, he says, let's be honest, you know, very small, Spike Chunsoft.
でまあ好き勝手その弾丸論破っていうゲームを作ったところまあたまたま売れてこういうことになりました。
So I entered that company. I made Danganronpa, and miraculously it sold, and now here I am.
So let's get into Danganronpa then, because that really was your introduction to the gaming industry. This is kind of what you started out doing. Where did this zany idea originate from?
まあオリジナルゲームを作るって時にいきなりその予算が大きいゲームは作れなかったんで、まあビジュアルノベルっていうジャンルにまず目をつけました。
So obviously for my first game it couldn't be some big budget thing. So I decided to go with a visual novel.
でもビジュアルノベルのその PSP のゲームっていうと当時日本では上限が5万本って言われててなかなか企画が通りづらかった。
So, you know, it was a PSP game, and I was told that the max sales I could expect from a PSP game that was a visual novel would be maybe 50,000.
まあその中でまあそういう思い込みっていうのをこう経営者側の5万もしか売れないよっていう意見を覆すためにどうすればいいかってことで、まあ自分のとりあえず好きなもの、まあバトルロワイヤルであったりとかそういうところをこう詰め込んでいった結果こういう風になりました。
That said, it didn't necessarily mean that even though I had this idea that my superiors would allow me to do this. And so in order to change their mind about visual novels, about the potential of a visual novel, I looked to my inspirations like Battle Royale and things like that. And I decided to, you know, to go to him, to my superiors, and to approach them and to get the opportunity to make this game.
And what was the kind of the embryonic idea in your head about what Danganronpa would be? I mean, obviously it turns into a game about a kids in a school and a murderous teddy bear.
そうですね。まあ、ミステリーゲームを作りたいっていうのがまず一番最初にありましたね。
So first and foremost, I wanted to make a mystery game.
まあ僕の中でビジュアルノベルっていっぱいあるんですけど、シュタインゲッツゲートみたいなタイプのがあんま好きじゃない。
So, you know, there's lots of different kinds of visual novels. And for example, there's something like, you know, Steins Gate, which I'm not really a big fan of.
やっぱビジュアルノベルはミステリーがつきものだと僕の中では思ってた。
And to me, a visual novel is a mystery game.
まあそんな中で、まあどうすればミステリーゲームでいけるのかなと思ってた時に、まあバトルロワイヤルとそのミステリーを足して 若者たちに殺し合いをさせながらミステリーにすればいいっていうところがこう思いついたきっかけですね。
So I thought, how can I make a good mystery game? What would be an interesting mystery game? And again, one of my inspirations was Battle Royale. And so I thought to myself, what if I combine these together? That would be a really cool mystery game. And so that's what, I ended up creating.
So why specifically, like, I'm kind of curious about this because I think a lot of people are curious about this, and I often notice it in my own experiences with Japanese games, which is extensive. What is it about kind of the teenage story or the story of children as opposed to adults that is so appealing as a storyteller? You see that with Persona, you see it with a game like Catherine, you see it in everything, in anime.
そう実は僕は弾丸論破作るまではアニメとかその辺の全然詳しくなかったんで、実はよくわかんない。
Well, actually, before when I was making Danganronpa, I never really watched anime before. It really wasn't my thing, so I'm really not entirely sure.
でも弾丸論破の場合はその物語を通じて成長っていうのを描きたかったんですね。
However, meaning what he meant to follow up a little bit earlier, meaning I don't know why Japanese people seem to always want to put, the setting for children and things like that. But for me, I wanted to show growth when I made Danganronpa.
だから完成された大人じゃなくて、未完成の子供を使いたいと思いました。
Therefore, in order to show this feeling of growth, it couldn't be an adult, someone who is, you could say, complete. It needed to be a child or a young person that could show growth.
あと死体発見シーンとか処刑シーンにおっさんとかおばさんがやられてるって姿がどうもピンとこなかった。
And so also when I was just thinking about the idea and playing around with the idea, finding the corpse of an old lady or an old guy, or the execution scenes for an old lady or an old guy, it didn't really strike me as really something that interesting.
より未来がある若者だからこそそれが途絶えさせられてしまう、悲しみとか絶望があるのかなと思いました。
And to talk more to that, the idea that as an adult, they might have lived a certain portion of their life, but as a child or a young person, they have a lot more of their life ahead of them, and having that life taken away from them would be more, despair-filled, more sad, more impactful to the viewer. And so that's what I really wanted to go for with this.
I saw, this had only broken a few months ago, and I had seen it on the internet about Monokuma's original design, which was not as a teddy bear. Where did the inspiration for this particular character come from, and how did you settle on this bizarre teddy bear that's half normal and half kind of evil?
実は一番最初のプロセスから今の完成に至るまではもう1時間ぐらいしか実は経ってない。
To be perfectly honest with you, this whole process of thinking about things in Monokuma and things like that, it was actually about an hour.
なんかよりドラマチックにするために制作費用をドラマチックにするためにちょっと捏造してる部分はあります実は。
So the idea of how to make things dramatic and how to do things, there's a little bit of I guess you could say stealing or plagiarism or forgery involved in this.
で本当はそもそもはnot guilty と not guilty で白と黒ってことで白と黒のキャラクターを作ろうと。
So first of all, the idea to make Monokuma was the idea of guilty and not guilty, which in Japanese is shiro, white, not guilty, and kuro, black, guilty.
でそれで学校には人体模型っていうのがあるんでそれを掛け合わせて作ろうってなったんですが最初やってみたらやっぱ気持ち悪いものになってしまったんで、これじゃマスコットにならないねって言った時どうしようってなった時になんか可愛い動物にすればいいんじゃない？クマ可愛いよね。じゃあクマでやろうってカーッと落書き書いてOK って感じでした。
So we were thinking about it, and obviously the setting is a school with young people and things like that. But the more we thought about the idea, the more we realized that it wasn't interesting. It ended up being too grotesque or something weird. And so we thought, well, what's cute? What's interesting? And we thought, well, bears are cute, right? Let's go with a bear. And so a bear design was drawn. We looked at it and said, perfect, let's go with that.
で怖い方はその人体模型の骨みたくしちゃうとやっぱ気持ち悪いんで。怖い方黒い方どうしようって時にスパイダーマンのベノムとかでいいんじゃないみたいなで合わせてOK みたいな。
So like you said, originally it was supposed to be like a humanoid figure, but eventually it turned into a bear. And so like I said before, we didn't really like the idea of it was kind of gross to have like a humanoid figure for this bear. So we went with something like Venom from Spider-Man and something like that. So that's kind of the image that we came up with.
So we talked a little bit about using children or young people and how that's kind of resonant with the story, and obviously it would make sense then that Trigger Happy Havoc would take place in a school. Where did you come up with these different characters, these different ultimates, as they're called in the series?
そうですね。まずミステリーで僕が嫌いだったのは死んじゃう人間物語読んでて死んじゃった人間が結構どうでもいいなっていつも思ってたのがそこはちょっと引っかかってるところだったんですよね。
So, I really like mysteries. And looking at mysteries, a lot of times the person who dies in a mystery is someone really unimportant or uninteresting. And that was something that I never really, cared for reading this mystery stuff.
なんで密室空間でその高校生たちだけにするって段階で全員が主人公になって誰が殺されてもショッキングな気持ちになるように考えました。
Therefore, once we had decided we're going to use, young people for the main characters, I wanted to create characters that each one of them was individual, unique, and interesting enough that they could potentially be the main character in their own game.
そこで一人一人を本当に主人公になるように自分はそのキャラクターで全部短編の小説を書けるかどうかそういうふうに心がけてキャラクターを作っていくときにやっぱ特徴付けとして何かの才能に秀でてるみたいなそういうふうなアイデアを盛り込みました。
So along with this process, I challenged myself with the idea that if I'm going to create this character, a new character, I want to think to myself, I could write an entire, short story about this character. And so from that jumping point, I decided to, that naturally led to the idea of the ultimate something or other. In order to create this, feeling of individuality, of interesting uniqueness per each character, this is the idea that I came to, and this is why all these characters have this incredibly, the ultimate, so on and so forth.
Is there an ultimate in Trigger Happy Havoc that resonates with you most? Are there characters that you really either enjoy looking back at, or some characters that you wish were maybe a little different, or that you scrapped or didn't include at all?
登場人物の中でやっぱり、特に逆にこの子をもう一回やるんだったら、多分こういうふうにするとかあったんでしょうか。
そうですね。特に好きなのはやっぱモノクマが一番好きですね。セリフが簡単に書けるんで。
Well, actually, I think the one that I like the most, maybe you could say, would be Monokuma. That's because I can write his lines very easily.
ただ他のキャラクターに関してはすごいよく聞かれるんですけど正直全員好きです。
And this is a question I actually get a lot, but truthfully speaking, I like all of them.
むしろその作る段階でそういうふうに全員好きになるように持ってってます。
And again, that's because when I was creating these characters, my whole point was to make characters that were likable by everybody, that were really good in and of their own right.
それが結構弾丸論破ってそれぞれのキャラクターにファンがついてたりするんですけど、それが理由かなと思ってます。
And each character within Danganronpa has their own set of fans. And I really think the reason for that is for what I just mentioned, that each character is unique and that I spend time and care and thought into each of them.
So, are there people at Spike Chunsoft, obviously you're kind of the visionary behind the series, but who are you relying on to kind of help you flesh out this vision, whether it's artists or other writers or programmers? Do you have like an intimate inner circle of people that you trust?
Mm. そうですね。弾丸論破に関してはメンバーは結構固定で作ってます。
Yeah, I mean the Dangan, anything related to Dangan is essentially created by one really core team.
特にキャラクターデザインの小松崎っていう人間はそのキャラクターをまず作ってる僕らが好きになるっていう段階に持っていくために脇役だからとかそういうことは一切関係なしに僕とその小松崎で結構何項も繰り返しますね。
So for example, the character designer, Mr. Komatsuzaki, he and I work very closely together. And, sometimes it takes many revisions for him to create a character a design rather, that I really like and feel that I relate with. So he's, kind of, someone very important to the process.
彼のデザインでシナリオを変えることもあるし、僕のシナリオをもうちょっとデザインを変えてもらうこともどっちもあります。
And actually there's times when, due to something that he's put into the design, I've changed something in the scenario, and vice versa. Due to, something that I've changed in the scenario, or I've put in the scenario, he's changed aspects of the character's design.
Can you talk a little bit about the juxtaposition between the dark themes of the game. The game is all about murdering other people and getting away with it in order to get away from a teddy bear who wants to murder you. But can you speak to, how do I put this? Can you speak to kind of the murderous scenes and the murder investigations and the darkness of the trials juxtaposed to free time when the music changes and you're walking around and you're just trying to date girls or meet people or learn more about them? That must be an intentional design decision.
はい。そうですね。一番の狙いはプレイヤーの気持ちにこう振り幅を作るっていうところでした。
So the main point, or my main idea when making this, is to create a situation where I can control the player's emotions in a broad way.
それが絶望とこの希望っていう2つの振り幅ですね。
And those two, I guess you could say, ending points of this swinging pendulum would be despair and hope.
だからシリアスなものばっかりじゃなくて、こう笑顔で鼻歌を歌いながらこう街を歩いてたら急に殺されるみたいな、でこうびっくりするみたいな、そういう振り幅を狙いました。
So to do that, you have your scenes of, like happiness and you're walking in the city and everything's fine and suddenly you get killed. And that kind of idea and that kind of setting allows me to create this, this effect.
そういう予想がつかないってところで、一番意識したのはプレイヤーがやめ時がないと思わせることですね。
And so the main
振り幅を作ることでストーリーの予想をできなくして、プレイヤーがいつやめればいいんだこのゲームはってなるようになるといいなと思ってました。
So his whole idea was that what he wanted to create was this sense of unpredictability. The player wouldn't be able to figure out what's going to happen next. They wouldn't know when it was going to end or how it was going to end. And that's what he was aiming for when he created this.
Excuse me. I was going to say one of the, I think, brilliant pieces of Danganronpa is not knowing when your free time is going to end, not knowing if you're wasting time with a certain person that is going to die and you're not going to see their storyline through, etc. and so on. Did you take some pleasure in writing these characters in the sense that you might, you know when everyone's going to be executed? But did you take pleasure in kind of being able to write in such a way as to maybe trick some people into spending time with the wrong people to watch them die, etc. and so on?
そういう書いてる部分はすごい楽しくて、やっぱりこのキャラクターはすぐに殺されるから、ちょっとこういう風にします。そういうような楽しいところが書いてる時にあったんでしょうか。
そうですね。逆にキャラクターを殺してこう罪悪感とかないですかとかいう質問もすごい多いんですが。
Interestingly enough, I guess kind of related to your question, I get the question a lot. Don't you feel a sense of guilt for having killed some characters?
全くないです。
But no, I don't feel any whatsoever.
でもなんかそれっていうのはキャラクターが物語上死んでもプレイヤーの心に残っていればそのキャラクターの死じゃないと思ってる。
Because I believe that even if a character might die within the midst of the scenario, they're not dead in the hearts of the player.
そのキャラクターをプレイヤーの心に残すってことが一番の目的に考えているので、そういうフリータイムの楽しいところとかもそうだし、シリアスなところもそうだし、そのキャラクターに魅力が出るかどうかってことを一番にやっぱ考えています。
Therefore, what I'm really aiming for with the free time scenes and everything isn't so much, how I can, fiddle with people's expectations or emotions, but more the idea, to make a standout character that remains in the hearts and the minds of the player, so that no matter what happens, they're there, and that's what the goal of all of that is.
むしろその書いてる時はだからそういうふうにやってるんですけど、むしろプレイした時になんでここでこいつ死んじゃうんだよとか、そういう客観的にそういうふうに思っちゃったりはします。
And so actually, even though I'm the one writing it, when I play it myself, sometimes I feel because I'm so invested in these characters myself, like when they die, like, oh my god, what? They died, why?
I suppose my next question would be kind of in the same vein. What games did you take inspiration from to make it more than just a visual novel? Obviously, it's a very dark game with interesting characters that you want to get involved in and with and know. But I see a lot of adventure game, or like, I see pieces of Phoenix Wright, for instance, in Danganronpa. What did you pull from any inspiration? Because I feel one of the great strengths of Danganronpa is how it radically changes over and over again from a more free play to a investigation to a trial. How did you kind of what did you draw from to kind of come to that? Because it's a pretty brilliant mixture.
いろんな、まあ
うん
混ぜてて、
はい
作られてるものですから、
はい
まあ、インスピレーションはどこから来たんでしょうか、ゲームとしてですね。
そうですね、逆転裁判とか、まあ、好きでプレイしてたんですけど、あれがやりたいっていうよりは、ああいうアドベンチャーゲームだったらオリジナルが作れるっていうところでしかありませんでしたね。安く作れる。
So I definitely obviously have played Ace Attorney, and that was an interesting game for me. But more than anything else, I was thinking, because I had to make, as I mentioned earlier, a visual novel, how to make the most interesting visual novel.
逆転裁判はすごい動くんで、実は金かかってますけど。
But that said, just as on a side note, I mean, even though Ace Attorney is a visual novel, it took a lot of money to make that game.
ただ影響を受けたのは、弾丸論破に関してはイルブリードっていうゲーム。
But specifically speaking of Danganronpa, one game that I received a lot of inspiration from was a game called Ill Breed.
あとコンカライブ&リローデットっていうレア社が作ってる、なんだろう、
And a game
ハムスターの。
Rare's Conquers games.
Oh.
ああいうなんだろう、こうブラックジョーク。
So I guess you could call it, dark humor or black humor. I really like that.
映画でもタランティーノとかコーエン兄弟。
So for
デビッド・リン
example,
チ。
to put it into movies, David Lynch, the Coen brothers, Tarantino, that kind of stuff.
そういうところにそういうシニカルな笑いというかブラックジョークみたいなところにすごい惹かれ、インスピレーションを受けてますね。
So I would say those are probably my big inspiration.
So when you had to deliver, or you didn't have to, I'm sure you wanted to deliver a second game. And I know that these were released in different sequences in Japan and they were kind of combined on PSP. But did you think when you were making Danganronpa, at least the original story in the school, that you were able to then going to be able to replicate it for a second game that was somewhat similar but also radically different in an entirely new environment?
弾丸論破として、一番作ってる時に、2番も作れるかどうか多分分からなかったんですが、2番目が出ると思って1番作ったんですか、それとも。
もう完全に1で終わりだと思ってました。
No, I mean, honestly, I really thought that, when I was making one was it. That was the only game I was going to be able to make.
制作中に僕らスタッフで言ってたのは、これはきっと売れないと思うけど、10年後もカルトゲームとして語り継がれるゲームにしようみたいなことは言ってましたね。
And even within like our team when we were making the game, number one, we said to ourselves, this might not sell at all, but this is going to be a game that 10 years from now, like, is going to be a cult hit.
それがでも売れたら会社が急に続編はどうみたいな。
But as soon as that game, Dangan 1 started to sell well in Japan, suddenly my superiors told me, hey, how about Dangan 2?
でもそれで気持ち切り替えてもう一回やろうかなと思って、こっちで発売してないんですけど、弾丸1の後に弾丸論破ゼロっていう小説を書いたんですね。
So, once I was told that, I started to work on, I thought, yeah, I can do this. I can make another one of these. And I started making Dangan 2. I know it's not come out in America, but actually in Japan, after Dangan 1, there's a novel that came out called Danganronpa 0.
それで弾丸ゼロで一回設定を全部整理して自分の中で組み立ててもう一回2を作れるようになりました。
So what Dangan 0 allowed me to do is to kind of look at the scenario one more time, look at things overall, put it all together in a way that, made sense to me. And then that allowed me to create a jumping point for Danganronpa 2.
One of the things that stood out to me most in Danganronpa 2, other than the fact that I was just so glad to be playing more of this, was it's radically different setting. It's on like a tropical archipelago as opposed to a school. So it's instantly wide open as opposed to enclosed in this building. But also the introduction of Monokuma's sister, for lack of a better term, Monami. Where did the inspiration for both the setting and this new character come from?
やっぱり弾丸論破2をやるときに、まずセッティングが全然違う。学校から、トロピカルの島、でまたモノクマの、大半のものが出てくる、その新しいトロピカル島のセッティングと、ものについてちょっと話していただけますでしょうか。
そうですね、最初に2を作れって言われた時に会社の誰かからか上の方の人間からゲームっていうのはもう3まで全く同じでいいんだよってすごい言われたんですね。それが反発になってます。
So actually, when I was given the directive to make Danganronpa 2, I was told, you know what, you can make 1, 2, and 3 all in the same style. And this is a direct reaction against that command.
で、できるだけ変えてやろうと思って、登場人物もまるっきり全部変えて、モノクマだけじゃなと思って、新しいキャラクターを入れたりとか、前閉鎖されてたんで、逆に開放的でいこうとか、できる限り変えようと思いました、むしろ。
So, for example, in order to do this, completely opposite thing, I thought I'm going to change the characters completely. I'm going to change the setting completely. I'm going to make it, more open or free as opposed to confined as the first game was. And so all of this, openness within the characters, within the setting is a reaction really against that. And that was my goal for this.
あとなんかすごくその頃に思ってたのが開かれた南国と言いつつそれは結局ゲームという機械の中の世界じゃん。だからそれも密室じゃんっていうのをすごい思ってて、だから他のオープンフィールドって言われるゲームであろうとオープンじゃないよねみたいな、これゲームの中の密室だよねとかそういうことを思ってて、逆にみんながイメージする密室じゃない密室を作りたかったっていうのもありますね。
So what I was also going for was, this idea that even though, it's a game and everything and things, it feels open, but it actually is confined, So this kind of, I guess you could say, contrast and things like that. The idea that getting the player to think that there's more space, there's more everything, but in reality, it is more confined once you really look at things closely.
What was it like to then move on to a game like Ultra Despair Girls that is totally radically different from what you had already created? Was this kind of refreshing for the team? I know you hear a lot from a lot of development teams that they don't want to do the same thing over and over again. Was this kind of a reset for your team to be like, we will maybe make this game, we'll get to that in a minute, the game that people really are waiting for, but in the meantime, we need a refresher ourselves?
そして弾丸2から、絶対絶望症状に何かそれはチームの、気持ちの切り替えとしてやってたんですか？そういう
いやそうですね、やっぱりそのアドベンチャーゲーム、弾丸論破といえばアドベンチャーゲームと言われることをなんか、そういう思い込みをなんかユーザーの思い込みをひっくり返したかったっていうのはありますね。
Actually, it was more the idea that, obviously people thought, maybe even still think, Danganronpa is a visual novel. It's an adventure game. And I wanted to play with those fans' expectations and those fans' ideas of what Danganronpa was.
なんか僕はユーザーがこう求めるものをそのまま返すっていうのが実は嫌いで。
Honestly, I don't like giving the users exactly what they want.
だからスピンアウトとかでも戦乱神楽みたいなやり方はあんま好きじゃない。
And so I don't really like,
言っちゃったけど。まあいいや。
I don't like necessarily doing spin-offs the way that, the Senran Kagura guy did things. Maybe I shouldn't have used his name directly, but...
エロくれよっていう客にエロを渡すみたいな。
So for example, in the case of that particular series, the fan base was like, more perviness, more of it. And he's like, okay, here's more.
でも、ね、一番思うのは、ユーザーが、いや、これはそんなに欲しくないんですけどっていうのに押し付けて、やってみたら、面白いですね、となって、そこからそのユーザーの世界が広がってほしいと思うんですよね。
So what I'm going for actually is that to say, okay, this is what I'm making, and players say, it's not really what I want, to be honest with you. And then for them to actually take that game, to play it, and to, have their field of view expand, or you could say, or, their experiences expand because of that. That's what I'm trying to do.
特に日本だと今TPS とか、FPS とかも FPS とか TPS でもうコアゲーマーしかやらないっていうイメージになっちゃってる。
So, speaking specifically to Dangan on another episode, there's this image in Japan that third-person shooters and first-person shooters are only played by hardcore gamers.
でもやってみれば全然面白いものもいっぱいあるけど、みんな食わず嫌いになっちゃってるんで、逆にその入門編としてこういうのをやって、そこからそのみんないろんな TPS やってもらえたらいいなっていう気持ちもありましたね。
So, because there's this feeling that this is for the hardcore, I wanted to create a game you could call maybe, an entry-level game to a third-person shooter. Something that would allow them to get their foot in the door to a genre maybe they've never even touched before, to kind of break down that barrier of feeling like, oh, this genre isn't for me because it's for X, Y, or Z person.
本当多少でいいんですけど、多少なりともやっぱユーザーの人生が変わらないとやっぱクリエイティブとは言えないのかなと思ってます。
I honestly believe that unless the player's life has changed in some way, I can't really call what I'm doing creativity.
It's deep. I appreciate your candor, by the way. Danganronpa, like many other products that come out of Japan, seem somewhat inaccessible to a Western audience, yet Danganronpa has a pretty hardcore audience here in the United States and in the West and Europe. Does that surprise you? Because I know that it took a while for the games to come here, like 3 or 4 years for at least the first one. Is it surprising to you that this game is extremely popular in a niche audience here in the United States? The fact that where we were at MomoCon in Atlanta, which is a Japanese anime convention, that people have their Danganronpa gear on there. They're excited about it. Greg bought me a toy down there for Monokuma. Are you surprised and happy that this game has found life outside of Japan?
やっぱり弾丸論破っていうのはまあ非常に日本のプロパティという印象があります。でもアメリカはすごく成功していまして、実は私がまあアトランタの、あとは東海岸ですねのモモコンっていうコンベンションに行って、弾丸のコスプレは普通にありまして、弾丸グッズはあったんですよ。で、それほどこのまあ本当に日本的なプロパティがアメリカで成功していることはびっくりされてますでしょうか？
そうですね。実は今年の3月の GDC に行くまでにはアメリカでそんな売れてると知らなかった。
Actually, so before I came this year to GDC in March, I didn't really realize that Dangan was doing so well over here.
でインタビュアーさん、その時に GDC 行ったついでにインタビューを受ける機会があったんですけど、インタビュアーさんみんなが弾丸論破大成功ですねって言われて、なんだ嫌味言ってんのかなってすごい思ってました。
And so I had a lot of interviews with media over here at GDC, and a lot of them said, Danganronpa has been so successful here, so successful here. And at first, actually, I thought they were speaking sarcastically to me.
ビータが全然売れてないっていう情報しか知らなかったんで。
Because I only knew that over here, the Vita was not doing well whatsoever.
でそこでアランにどのくらい売れてるのって言われて数字を聞いて、そんな売れてるんだってちょっとびっくりしましたね。
So I asked Alan how well it was doing, and Alan told me, and I was really surprised.
もともと弾丸論破ってパロディがすごい多いんですけど、実はタランティーノの、映画のパロディをやる手法をゲームとか日本とかアニメというものでやりたいっていうのがあったので、それがこっちのイマジネーションの元となったタランティーノの国で受け入れられてるっていうのは嬉しいですね。
So, like I said previously, Tarantino, the director, Quentin Tarantino, is a really big inspiration for me. And, those kinds of references, the jokes that he does, obviously, and the things that he does, I tried to replicate within, Danganronpa. And, in a very real way, Danganronpa is somewhat like a Tarantino creation. And the fact that this creation, which even could be called, maybe like a Tarantino knockoff or whatever, is successful over here is something that's incredibly gratifying to me, and I'm really happy about.
Do you think that, and we were talking a little bit about Japanese, before this, about Japanese gaming and the Japanese game industry and the Western game industry and how there's kind of a ping pong effect between the two in terms of influences. Does this give you hope that there might not be as many differences between Japanese gamers and American gamers as some people read into? Because I personally do not believe that there's many fundamental differences between, we all want good games.
そしたら先ほどの会話の続いてやっぱり先ほどの小沢さんの話を聞くと、やっぱり欧米日本とそこまで間に違いがなくて、やっぱりゲーマーは一つのことしか欲しくないと思われてるんですか？
そうですね。ゲーマー目線で僕実はそんなに考えてなくて、なんでしょう、国別でも考えてなくて、所詮僕らが作るものは十何人で作ってるものなんで、200何人で作ってるものの規模に勝てるわけがない。
Well, on the one hand, I do see what you're saying, but the truth really is for our team, we're a very, very small team, and we can't even really make, something as appealing, you could say, as a team comprised of many hundreds of people.
ただユーザーからしたら全部ゲームソフトと同じ値段なんですよね。
So I don't really think about things as such of gamers. What I do think though is that, thinking about the price of a game.
だから予算なんてユーザーからしたら全く関係ないので、逆に言ったら他で勝てるものを作らなくちゃいけないっていうのをすごく意識してて、そういうなんでしょう、他で勝たなくちゃいけない要素っていうのが結局万国共通なのかなっていうか、必ずしもでっかい規模ででっかいフィールドっていうわけじゃなくて、何か心に刺さるものが欲しいと思ってるユーザーがやっぱ全国共通で世界共通でいるのかなと思いました。
So, users, it doesn't matter how big a budget is. All they want is something that, resonates with them. And, there's lots of talk nowadays about open world and about, these games of this really grand scale. But to me, what I think is an effective game or a good game for the user, something to get us out there to hit those users, is to really create something that does resonate with them and really speak deeply to them.
Why? I mean, maybe it speaks to the, again, we were talking about price point. We're also talking about the scale of your games and the small nature of your team. Why does Danganronpa work well on something like PSP or Vita? And is there a future for Danganronpa on consoles, or do you feel like this is something that really needs to be relegated to a handheld experience? And if so, why does it work so well as a handheld?
danganronpaについて、なぜその携帯機、例えば据え置きだとダメですか？それとそれについてちょっと。
そこはですね、すごい会社的な判断になりますね。予算の問題です、正直。
That's actually, to be perfectly frank with you, that's more a matter of the amount of budget I'm given from the company.
ただ僕らとして作る側としてはもちろんその PS4 とかで出したいって気持ちはあります。
Honestly, as a creator, I want to make something for PS4.
ただ1、2とそのスピンアウトに関してはまだ日本でのその売れ行きとかをその中心で考えているのでビータという選択になりました。
But looking at the sales numbers of Dangan 1 and 2 in Japan, that kind of determined that Ultra Despair Girls would be on Vita.
ただおかげさまでいろいろ国内もそうですし国外世界的にいろいろこの応援いただいてるんで今後に関してはまだ分からないですね。
But that said, since another episode's come out in Japan and the success of the series over here, that might change in the future.
とはいえ結局どの機種になってもやることは変わらないですね。その超美麗なフォトリアルなものが作りたいとかそういうことじゃなくて弾丸論破オリジナルの絵を作りたい。
That said, regardless of what platform Dangan comes out on, our goal and our vision does not change. And that's not photorealism or something, amazing like that. That's to make a game that is only like Danganronpa.
I've buried the lead for a lot of people out there that really want to know about Danganronpa 3. Obviously, Ultra Despair Girls is, I guess, the third Danganronpa game. But people are curious what the future holds for the traditional... I use traditional in quotes. I mean, there's nothing traditional really about Danganronpa, but about the kind of the mainstay visual novel adventure game type Danganronpa. Is this game in development, and can you tell us anything about it?
弾3は開発中ですか？で、もし開発中でしたら、それについてちょっと話していただけますでしょうか？
開発中ですね。
Yeah, Dangan 3 is in development.
ただおそらくこれも結構いろんなところで言ってるんですけど、おそらく誰も想像つかない形になると思います。
And I've been saying this for a while now, but honestly, I think it's going to eventually come out in a form that no one is going to expect.
いろんな人に結構弾丸3、友達とかにも言われるんですけど、こういう風にやるんじゃないのみたいな冗談で言われたりするんですけど、当たったことある人は誰もいない。
And I have a lot of friends and acquaintances that'll come up to me and say, "You're gonna make something like this, huh? It's gonna come out like this." And to be honest with you, all of their projections have been completely wrong.
ひょっとしたら新ハードを作るかもしれない。
I might actually make new hardware just to put the game on.
でもそれは冗談として結構面白い試みをやってると思うんで、最初に見たり最初に情報が発表されたらちょっと戸惑うかもしれないですけどね。
But that was a joke, obviously. But I really feel that when it comes time to announce the game and to give more particulars, people are going to be really surprised about what they see.
でもそういうことができるタイトルっていうのもありがたいことだし、だからとことん悪ふざけをしてやろうかなと思ってます。
And so, Dangan is a title that I can kind of do this with and play around with. And so I'm kind of looking forward to, fiddling around with people's emotions and expectations when it comes time to announce the game.
I need like a fan. I'm so excited about all this Danganronpa 3 talk. Well, I want to kind of conclude just to, thank you for your time, for being here. And of course, Alan, thank you so much for your time as well. It's always good to see you. Many, many congratulations to you and your team on the success of Danganronpa.
Thank you very much.
And we're super excited to see what's next from you and the team. And you teasing it like this is just making the wait harder. But hopefully we'll hear more. And in the meantime, thank you for delivering really some of the most unique experiences that many of us have played here in the West in quite some time.
こっちの人たちがすごい待ってますので、よろしくお願いします。
そうですね。そう遠くない未来にいろいろ出す発表はできるかなと思ってます。
Well, honestly, I feel like it's not going to be too long before I can actually announce something. So
Cool. Well, feel free to do it exclusively on Kind of Funny if you want.
でもしあれでしたらこちらで最初に。
こっそりね。
I'll do it secretly.
Thank you. All right, so for all of you out there, remember, Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc available on Vita, digitally, retail. Danganronpa 2, Goodbye Despair, available digitally and retail. Ultra Despair Girls, which is the new kind of third-person shooter, kind of stranger, if it can be any stranger than real Danganronpa. Game comes out September 1st in North America, digital and just September 3rd in Europe.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Digital and retail. So keep an eye out for all of those. And of course, an exciting announcement, hopefully soon for Danganronpa 3, which is apparently something we're not going to expect, which is exactly the way I want it. Kazutaka Kodaka, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Alan Costa, of course. Always good to see you, my friend.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you all out there for continuing to support us here at Kind of Funny. I hope you enjoyed this interview like you enjoyed the last one, and we'll do more of them as well, but it was a great honor to have Kodaka-san here with us to talk a little bit about what's going on with Danganronpa, a series that's near and dear to my heart, as many of you guys know. So enjoy those Danganronpa games, buy them, support NIS and Spike Chunsoft, and hopefully we'll get more of those in the near future. Till next time, goodbye.